I found my wife's affair with her boss hidden behind a fake divorce, only to discover she secretly transferred $250, $0 into her sister's account to buy property. Now she's suing me for half the inheritance I never knew I had. I never thought I'd be the guy to find out my wife was cheating on me, especially not in such a twisted way. It started with little things, her phone ringing at odd hours, her avoiding certain questions, and her being inexplicably secretive about her schedule. I always figured she was just busy or stressed, but deep down, I sensed something was off. Still, I never expected to uncover a web of lies that would blow my entire life apart. One night, I was going through our shared bank account statements out of curiosity. I'd been feeling uneasy for weeks but couldn't put my finger on why. As I scrolled through the transactions, I noticed a strange transfer, $250, into her sister's account. That amount was a red flag by itself, but what really threw me was the timing. It was transferred right after she claimed she was saving up for a new car, which she'd been talking about for months. I found that suspicious, but it didn't end there. I decided to dig deeper. I downloaded her emails, her texts, and even checked her phone's hidden folders. That's when I stumbled across a string of messages between her and her boss, Mark. Their conversations weren't just professional banter. They were intimate, flirtatious, and downright inappropriate. They talked about meeting up after hours, secret plans, and even about their little secret. I couldn't believe what I was reading. My wife Lisa was having an affair with her boss, Mark, and they'd been doing it behind my back for months, possibly longer. What made it worse was that she had been pretending everything was fine. She'd act sweet, care for the kids, even pretend to be the perfect wife. Meanwhile, she was sneaking around, lying, and secretly transferring money to her sister, who was apparently using it to buy property. I couldn't wrap my head around her motivations. Was she planning to leave me? Or was she just using me as a cover for her real life? The betrayal hit hard. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. My mind was racing, trying to process how I'd been so blind. That night I confronted her. I showed her the bank transfer, the emails, everything I'd found. Her reaction was a textbook example of outright denial mixed with frantic lies. She told me the money was a loan she'd taken from her sister, that Mark was just a friend, and that I was overreacting. She said I was paranoid, that she loved me, and that I was just jealous because I didn't trust her. But I knew better. I saw the way she avoided eye contact, the nervous twitch in her voice, and the way she kept twisting her stories to fit her narrative. The emotional roller coaster was brutal. I went from shock to rage, then to sadness, and finally to a numb acceptance. I felt betrayed not just by her actions, but by the woman I'd trusted with my life. I kept asking myself how she could lie so effortlessly, how she could betray me and our family so casually. I wondered what I'd done wrong, if I'd missed the signs, or if she was just inherently unfaithful. The pain was overwhelming, and I couldn't sleep for days, replaying everything over and over in my head. I felt stupid for trusting her, for believing she was my soulmate. In the midst of all this chaos, I started thinking about what to do next. Could we salvage what was left? Was there any way to fix this? Or was I better off walking away and starting fresh? The thought of losing her was unbearable, but so was staying and watching her continue her double life. I knew I had to make a decision soon, but right now, I was just trying to survive the storm inside my head. After that confrontation, everything changed. I couldn't look at Lisa the same way. The woman I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize, someone who lied so effortlessly, who betrayed me in the worst way possible. But even with all the pain and anger swirling inside me, I knew I needed to get some concrete answers. I couldn't just sit around and stew in my own misery. I had to find out how deep this rabbit hole went. The next few days were a blur. I started digging through her financial records more thoroughly. It wasn't just the one transfer. There were smaller deposits, expenses, and odd withdrawals I'd missed before. I discovered that she'd transferred a huge chunk of money, another $100, $0, into her sister's account, supposedly to buy property. The way she'd hidden it, the timing, and the amount all screamed that she was planning something big. I also found out that her sister, Emily, had been secretly buying land and property all over the city, using the money Lisa transferred. I felt a mixture of disgust and betrayal. My wife had been lying to me for months, secretly funneling money into her sister's name, probably to set herself up for some kind of escape or new life. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. All the signs were there. Her secretive behavior, her phone always locked, her vague excuses, and I just ignored them because I loved her. Now I saw it was all just a facade. I decided to confront her again, but this time I was more prepared. I sat her down, showed her everything I'd uncovered, and pressed her for answers. Her face turned pale when I laid out the evidence. She started to stammer, trying to deny everything, but I cut her off. I told her I knew about the affair, the money transfers, her plans with her sister. Her eyes welled up with tears, but I wasn't buying her crocodile tears anymore. She begged, lied, and tried to manipulate me into believing she was innocent, claiming it was all misunderstandings and bad choices. But I wasn't falling for it. That's when she dropped the bombshell. She claimed she was trying to protect me, that she didn't mean for me to find out this way, and that her affair with Mark was just a mistake she was going to fix. She said she loved me and that she'd stop everything if I just forgave her, but I knew better. I knew she'd been planning her exit all along, and her tears were just part of her game. The emotional toll was staggering. I felt like I'd been punched again, but this time I was the one holding the punch. I was furious, hurt, and deeply betrayed. The woman I loved had been lying to my face, cheating on me, secretly siphoning off money, and probably planning to leave me with nothing. Her excuses sounded hollow, and her tears only made me angrier. I realized that my trust was shattered beyond repair. I started to think about what I should do next. I wasn't about to let her walk away with everything: my money, my marriage, my dignity. I needed a plan. I decided I'd gather all the evidence I had, consult a lawyer, and prepare for whatever was coming. I also realized I had to protect myself financially. Divorce or not, I didn't want her taking half of what I'd worked for all these years. I was starting to see that this wasn't just about her cheating. It was about her trying to screw me over, and I wasn't going to let that happen. Meanwhile, she kept pleading, trying to guilt me into staying, claiming she'd do anything to fix this mess. But I was already mentally preparing for the worst. I knew I couldn't trust her anymore, and I didn't want to be with someone who lied so effortlessly, who betrayed everything we built together. I felt like I was waking up from a nightmare, but the scars of her betrayal would stay with me forever. I just hoped I'd find a way to move on from this, without her, with some dignity left, and maybe, someday, with some peace. After I collected enough evidence and saw how deep her lies went, I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. The betrayal was too raw, too complete. I didn't want to be the guy who got played for a fool, especially not by someone I'd trusted with my entire life. So I started to plan my next move carefully. I needed to protect myself financially, emotionally, and legally. I wasn't about to let her walk away with the money she'd stolen and the life she'd destroyed. I reached out to a lawyer the very next day. I wanted to make sure I knew my rights and what I was up against. The lawyer told me that based on what I'd shown her, I had a solid case for divorce and possibly for financial abuse. I also had evidence of her transferring large sums of money to her sister's account, which could be considered asset hiding. It was clear she was planning to run or at least cut me out of her life completely. I had to act fast. Meanwhile, Lisa kept up her act, crying and begging for forgiveness. She claimed she was confused, that she didn't mean for any of this to happen, and that she was sorry she hurt me. She even tried to turn the tables, saying I was paranoid and overreacting, but I could see through her. Her tears seemed calculated, her words rehearsed. I knew she was trying to manipulate me into backing down, but I wasn't falling for it anymore. I was done being the fool. I started documenting everything: her secret texts, the bank transfers, her attempts to deny or downplay everything. I also installed some discreet surveillance to confirm her whereabouts and activities. I wanted to have all my bases covered. I knew once I filed for divorce, she'd try to fight me for everything, including the inheritance I didn't even know I had. That was another bombshell I uncovered during my digging. She was suing me for half of an inheritance I'd inherited from my grandmother, which I'd never told her about. She was trying to take half of that too, claiming it was marital property. I was stunned. How much more was she planning to take? The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I had worked my ass off for years, building a good life, and she was just siphoning off money and scheming to take what wasn't hers. I realized I had to get ahead of her plans and fight back hard. I was starting to see that this wasn't just a cheating scandal. It was a calculated attempt to drain me dry and walk away with everything I owned. In the meantime, I kept my cool around her. I didn't let her see how much she was getting to me. I knew I had to stay calm if I wanted to win this. I told her I was filing for divorce and that I'd be seeking full custody of the kids. She tried to gaslight me, saying I was overreacting and that she'd change, but I didn't buy it. I knew her game now. She was a liar, a manipulator, and a thief. I was done being her victim. I also started making plans to protect my assets. I reached out to a financial advisor to help me freeze certain accounts and make sure she couldn't drain everything. I also hired a private investigator to keep tabs on her movements, just in case she tried to disappear with the money or hide assets further. It felt like I was fighting a war, but I was determined not to lose everything I'd worked so hard for. The emotional toll was heavy. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I knew I had to stand my ground. I couldn't let her manipulate me or take advantage of my trust anymore. I'd been blindsided, yes, but I was not going to be a victim. I was going to fight for what was rightfully mine, my dignity, my assets, and my sanity. And somehow, I knew I'd come out of this stronger. I just had no idea how much more chaos was still to come. Once I had the legal groundwork laid out, I felt a strange mixture of relief and dread. I knew I was taking the right steps, but I also understood this wasn't going to be easy. Lisa, in her typical bitchy tone, started to get more aggressive, trying to manipulate the situation in her favor. She threw tantrums, accused me of ruining her life, and kept insisting she was innocent, despite all the evidence stacked against her. It was infuriating. She acted like she was the victim, when in reality she was the one who'd been planning this whole time. She began to lash out, trying to paint me as the bad guy. She told friends and family I was paranoid, that I'd lost my mind, and that I was trying to control her. She even tried to turn the kids against me, saying I was acting out of anger and not fit to be a father. That was the last straw. I knew she was just desperate to cling to whatever she could, but I refused to be manipulated anymore. I had to keep my focus on protecting myself and my future. Meanwhile, the financial situation was heating up. I learned that she had transferred even more money, another $50, $0, into her sister's account, and she was pushing her to buy property now. I found out that Emily, her sister, was already in the process of purchasing land, using the money Lisa had secretly transferred. It was clear she was planning to disappear, or at least cut me out entirely, and that she saw this as her way to start fresh. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind for so long. I also discovered that she'd been secretly talking with Mark, her boss. They'd arranged secret meetings, and she'd even told him she was planning to leave me once she'd secured her new property and her sister's investments. I felt like I was living in some bad soap opera. The betrayal was complete. Not only had she lied about everything, her affair, her secret transfers, her plans for the future, but she was actively working to turn her life into a clean break, leaving me with nothing. I decided to confront her again, but this time with everything laid out in front of her. I sat her down and told her I knew about the affair, the transfers, and her plans. I told her I was going to take her to court, fight for custody of the kids, and make sure she didn't get away with a penny of my inheritance or any of our assets. Her face twisted with anger, and she started to scream at me, calling me controlling, paranoid, and jealous. She insisted she loved me, that she'd never cheat or steal from me. It was all a lie, just another manipulation to keep me off balance. Seeing her so furious and desperate made me realize how much she'd been lying and scheming. I felt a strange mix of pity and disgust. Pity because she was clearly drowning in her own lies, and disgust because she had betrayed everything we stood for, everything I thought we had. I knew I needed to keep my guard up. I couldn't let her guilt trip or manipulate me into backing down. I had to stay strong for myself and for the kids. I also started to get serious about the inheritance. I found out that my grandmother had left me a significant estate, more than I'd ever known, and Lisa was trying to claim half of it. That was the final straw. I had to fight hard to keep what was mine. I contacted my lawyer again to prepare the legal documents to protect my assets and to get a restraining order if necessary. I couldn't let her continue her game of deception and theft. In the back of my mind, I was overwhelmed. The betrayal cut deep. I'd loved Lisa, trusted her, and now I felt like I'd been played for a fool. But I also felt a fierce determination. I was done being the victim. I was going to stand my ground, fight for my rights, and get my life back on track. I knew this was just the beginning of a long, messy battle, but I was ready. I had to be, for my sake, for my children's future, and for whatever shred of dignity I had left. The legal battle was about to kick into full gear, and I knew Lisa wasn't going to go quietly. She ramped up her bitchy attitude, throwing tantrums, accusing me of ruining her life and trying to paint herself as the victim. She called me controlling, paranoid, and said I was trying to trap her. Honestly, it was almost laughable. She thought she could manipulate her way out of this mess, but I wasn't buying any of her bullshit anymore. I'd seen through her lies, and I was prepared to fight for everything. She started to threaten me with false accusations, claiming I was abusive, that I was trying to ruin her reputation. She even tried to turn the kids against me, saying I was unfit as a father. That was the turning point for me. I knew I had to stay calm and focused, because this was her last-ditch effort to keep control. I documented every interaction, every lie, every manipulative tactic she threw my way. I had to be ready for whatever legal or emotional attack she'd launch next. Meanwhile, I kept digging into her financial mess. I found out she'd transferred even more money, another $75, $0, into her sister's account, and she was pushing her to finalize the property deals. I learned that Emily was in the process of buying land in her name, funded entirely by the money Lisa transferred. She was clearly gearing up for some kind of escape plan, or at least trying to shield her assets from me. I was furious. I'd been played for a fool for years, and now she was trying to wipe her hands clean and walk away with everything. I also discovered that Mark, her boss, was heavily involved in her plans. They'd been meeting in secret, discussing her leaving her job, and even talking about starting some kind of joint venture. It wasn't just an affair. There was a business angle, and I was starting to suspect she'd been using her relationship with Mark to cover her tracks. All the pieces fell into place: the secret transfers, the affair, the property plans, and her attempts to manipulate her way out of the situation. I knew I couldn't let her get away with any of it. I sat her down again, this time with the legal documents I'd prepared. I told her I was going to file for divorce, seek full custody of the kids, and fight to keep my inheritance. Her face twisted with fury when I told her I'd be taking her to court over the property and the money she'd stolen. She yelled, screamed, and tried to guilt-trip me, claiming I was ruining her future, but I didn't care. I was done playing nice. The worst part was realizing how much she'd been planning all along. Her lies, her manipulations, they weren't just moments of weakness. They were calculated moves. She'd been secretly transferring money, planning her escape, and using her position with Mark to her advantage. It hit me hard. I'd been blind to how cold and ruthless she could be. I'd loved her, trusted her, but now I saw her for what she truly was, a manipulative, dishonest woman who'd been scheming behind my back for years. I also took steps to secure my assets. I met with a financial advisor to freeze certain accounts, transfer some of my inheritance into protected accounts, and prepare for the legal fight ahead. I was determined to keep what was mine and make sure she couldn't drain or hide it. I knew she'd keep fighting, but I was ready for the long haul. I couldn't let her win, not after everything. The emotional toll was immense. Every day felt like walking through a minefield. I was angry, betrayed, and exhausted, but I also felt a strange sense of relief. I was finally taking control of my life again. I knew this was just the beginning of a battle I might not fully win, but I was going to fight for my future, my kids, and whatever dignity I had left. I'd learned a hard lesson. Trust can be shattered in an instant, and sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who hurt you the most. But I also learned that resilience and standing up for yourself are the only ways to survive. The court date finally arrived, and I was ready. All the evidence I'd gathered, her secret transfers, the emails with Mark, the financial manipulations, was laid out clearly. Lisa showed up looking frantic, trying every trick in the book to sway the judge. She cried, she begged, she even accused me of trying to destroy her, but I knew better. I had no choice but to stay firm. I couldn't let her manipulate her way into getting half of my inheritance or more of my assets just because she'd lied, cheated, and schemed. The judge listened carefully, reviewing the evidence and hearing both sides. It was clear she'd been planning her escape for months, and her attempts to manipulate the court were transparent. In the end, I was awarded full custody of the kids, and the court ordered Lisa to return the stolen money and property she transferred into her sister's name. The inheritance was protected, and she was ordered to pay legal restitution for the financial damage she caused. Watching her leave the courtroom, furious and defeated, was a strange mix of relief and emptiness. I'd lost the woman I loved, yes, but I'd gained clarity. I realized that I'd been holding onto a fantasy of what our marriage was supposed to be, not the reality of who she really was. The betrayal cut deep, but it also freed me from years of lies and deception. In the aftermath, I focused on rebuilding. I worked with my lawyer to secure my assets, and I started to heal emotionally, though some scars will never fully fade. I also made sure to prioritize my children's well-being. They deserved stability, and I promised myself I'd give them the best life I could, even if it meant starting over alone. Looking back, I learned a lot from this nightmare. Trust is fragile, and sometimes the people you love the most can hurt you in ways you never expected. But I also learned that you can survive betrayal, that standing up for yourself is crucial, and that sometimes you have to fight hard just to reclaim your life. I hope anyone going through something similar sees that even in the darkest moments, there's a way forward, one that involves facing the truth, fighting for what's right, and never losing sight of who you are. Because in the end, no betrayal can define you if you refuse to let it.